I've been considering recently how to best begin adding more content to the channel in a way that is more expedient than my traditional review process, but still engages thoroughly with any ideas I want to discuss that relate to a specific game, and I want to make sure I have no need to attach these ideas to what I feel must be a fairly rigorous and complete analysis of a game if it is to stand by itself as a review. Okay, so that's the scripted part of this video. I'm now going to stop reading what I've written. Today I want to talk about Persona 3. And I have the original release, so it's Shin Megami Tensei Persona 3. It's not Persona 3 FES, and it's not portable, even though I've played portable. But I just have a few quick thoughts that are in my head, and I want to get them onto paper. Or in this case, I want to get them onto YouTube, or I want to get them onto video. So the point is that I will have a couple of games, or I plan to have a couple of games that I talk about like this, where I can play the game, have something interesting to say for my own benefit, and maybe it'll hit something interesting. Okay, back to the script. The result I've come up with, therefore, is a simple point-by-point structure that collects a few thoughts I have on a particular game that I hope can allow for sufficiently deep discussion of particular issues without having to spend as much time tying those ideas together. Let's try doing the following. I'm going to read a bit from the script and then talk a bit more about what I'm saying. The exact moment that prompted me to start writing this video was a moment about a third of the way into the game that explains how the game's social link framework is actually related to the 22 major arcana that are used to identify various characters with whom the player interacts. Okay, so what I mean here is, finally a Persona game explained why they use tarot cards and why they use tarot card reading. Because you know thematically, basically why they do it, but it's never been explicit. I found this quite interesting. Specifically, it explained how the 22 major arcana in tarot card reading detail the many phases in the hero's journey or the monomyth. That sounds pretty self-explanatory. The protagonist begins as the fool, who knows nothing but is theoretically full of potential. The first step for the fool is to become the magician, a character who is crucially full of energy or impetus to begin their journey, i.e. to begin the hero's journey, and throw themselves into the world. The magician must, therefore, before he can move on, come to terms with his naivety. This is pretty self-explanatory as well. The first step for any hero is that he must embody, to some degree, enthusiasm. He must actively step out into the world and make his first movement towards becoming a hero. But as he does that, he must learn from the world. He must come to terms with his own inexperience in dealing with the world, and he must adjust accordingly. The following step from the magician, if indeed he has dealt with his naivety, is the priestess. The priestess represents contemplation, a necessary result of someone who was too willing to throw themselves headfirst at an opportunity. This goes on and on, but I'm not here to talk specifically about how the progression or sequence works. I'm more interested in how them explaining that this is the way the arcana are supposed to relate to the social links, how that affects the game. Back to the script. When all the arcana are elucidated in this way, it adds a significant layer of analysis to consuming social links. This makes it sound like I've eaten them. It's particularly enjoyable to see how the game chooses to represent or embody each of the phases of the hero, the obstacles associated with this particular phase, and how the character that embodies this phase attempts to overcome this and move on to the next phase. In this way, the game hopes to inform the player's path towards personal individual growth. Point 2. The next point is my surprise at how engaged I've been during dungeon crawling. This is an element of Persona that has been changed quite considerably between iterations of the main series, and is considered the game's weakest attraction. The largest difference in Persona 3 compared to the rest of the series is the lack of direct party control. So players must choose tactics for their members to follow rather than issue them direct commands. This is often the thing that's criticized about this version of the game, and is changed, at least in Persona 3 Portable, but might also be changed in FES if I ever play it. But I could fact check that, but I'm not bothered. Admittedly, there are problems associated with using these tactics options, which are limited, the amount of options you have are limited, at the start of the game. And a lack of direct party control can sometimes, there's an understatement of the century, can sometimes lead to unfortunate decisions by party members at key moments. However, the positive side of this decision is that, as the so-called leader of the group, the player character is positioned more like a commander in battle, and it necessitates that they fill a wider variety of roles, make a greater number of decisions, and generally be more proactive, in brackets I have here, as leaders theoretically should. The very real and tangible result of this is that the characters in your party are inclined to feel more like entities that require, that's a real undersell there, like entities that require actual leadership, let's just say people. Like people that require actual leadership, in contrast to feeling just like a simple extension of the player, and this is a significant distinction. This system, as I've mentioned, is not without its flaws, but this difference that it makes is noticeable. The result is a far greater sense of camaraderie that is achieved through cooperative accomplishment rather than personal intervention. What do I mean? It means like you've actually corralled a group into doing something great, or doing something worthwhile, or actually achieving something. It's less like playing chess and more like coaching a team. I'm about to make a segue. This appears to be an underlying theme in my experience with Persona 3 overall, and even though many of the other Persona games really strive for this same concept, as indeed most RPGs do, what I'm referring to here is the sense of camaraderie, Persona 3 takes risks such as this, which make a significant difference when they pay off. So what I mean here is there were genuinely times where where I would have said to myself, I can't believe Mitsuru actually chose the right move, great move. And thus you were dealing with them more as people. Limited actors, you might say, but actors nonetheless. And I think that's quite fun. Indeed, this theme re-emerges when examining the integration of social links with the game's main arc, doing so in a way that is also distinct from Persona 4 and Persona 5. Party members, otherwise known as members of SEES, this is the game's main band of heroes, or troop of heroes, they're not available as social links until relatively late in the game. The result of this is that at the beginning the player must venture out into the world to discover what social links are available. In other words, how do I socialize? I'm a total loner, I'm new here, I don't know anyone. The best thing for me to do is probably to go out and make some friends. Not only is this sense of discovery, i.e. the sense of discovering people within the world, because you're rudderless and you have to, there isn't a group of plucky kids who are all already friends willing to adopt you, I suppose. That doesn't exist in this game. Not only is this sense of discovery and initial isolation thus amplified, but it adds to a sense that your dorm mates begin the story as colleagues rather than friends. And thus it means that growing closer to your comrades in the dorm occurs at a slower rate. I think it makes the movement, therefore, that happens throughout the game, where SES become more united, you might say. It makes that far more potent, maybe is the way to put it. More importantly, the game ties your party members' growth and personal development, i.e. the members of SES, more to the events of the main story. And it means, in contrast to how it is tied to the social link process in other Persona games, that these developments can be more meaningfully reflected in the story itself. It's fair to say that both Junpei and Yukari appear to develop far more over the course of the tale than core characters in Persona 4. Having their major personal evolution not be tied to a social link means that the developer need not worry about what stage of the link Chie may be at, and whether her personal growth can be shown in the story. I also assume this explains why all the girls' links end in romance, and Junpei, Ken, and Akihiko are not sociable. Okay. The trade-off, of course, is that the player has less of a hand in bringing about the revelation, and removes this satisfying sense of altruism, or this gratifying sense of altruism, that occurs in Persona 4. It feels more in that game, and 5, but let's think about 4, the two PlayStation 2 games. That you were sort of a personal psychiatrist. It doesn't feel quite like that in Persona 3. Nonetheless, it is more satisfying to see and feel these changes more readily in Persona 3, as they are expressed over the course of the game. On top of this, when the game reaches its climax, there is a far stronger sense of unity for this reason. Not only are all of you comrades because you are members of SEES, but you are close friends because you all grew due to your experience with SEES, and everyone else was there to witness it and learn from it as well. Crucial moments of growth were shared, not separated or hidden, and still retain the frame of personal evolution and emphasis on the individual that is the core of the Persona series. Okay, point 4. Oh, yes, okay. For my next point, I want to draw attention to the final stretch of the game, and thus I will have to speak fairly vaguely. Not like I don't speak vaguely the rest of the time. It is fair to say that the final stretch of Persona 3 is characterized by a large amount of waiting, to put it euphemistically. Though this sounds like a negative, it has a very interesting way of casting the usual everyday humdrum. Is that even a word? It's not a word, but am I even using the right colloquialism? Of Persona in a different light than usual, and as such is a very unique stretch of the modern Persona games, by which I mean 3, 4, and 5. The challenge of Persona's simulation and calendar systems has always been in how to break up larger stretches of the game where there is less plot-related momentum, because no matter how interesting a social link is, and how enjoyable it may be to organize your time, there will nonetheless always be moments where this becomes dull and tedious and rote. In effect, this stretch that I've mentioned adds a strong sense of separation from the usual schoolwork, the bustle of students in the city. And to put it briefly, it permeates the entire social link experience in a totally novel and commendable way. If there is an example of how to break up long stretches of the series in interesting ways, this period of the game is an excellent example. I don't want to be specific here, but what I mean is it's different than just you've come back, there's been a story beat in Persona 5, and everyone's depressed, and they all mention it. And there's sort of a bit of a downer atmosphere because somebody's heart got stolen or something like this. What happens makes you allocate your time. It makes you reconsider how you should do it. And it's definitely one of the most interesting periods of any Persona game for that reason. My final point is short and sweet and is common to both Persona 3 and 4, the two PlayStation 2 entries in the series. It is the commendable way the developers choose their details. It's easy to gush about high-level budget games with amazingly realistic details in animation or environment design, but I've always considered that when time and resources are limited, the process of deciding what details to include to be an art form. To me, this is typified by the sound of socked feet on wooden stairs during loading between the living room and your bedroom in Persona 4. But its origins are noticeable as well in Persona 3. This includes most notably in the Velvet Room, when the tablecloth sways oh so elegantly, or when Mitsuru's hair is swept up by the rush of wind that comes from summoning Artemisia. Most importantly of all, it extends to particularly tender moments that I don't want to spoil, but I've always been extremely impressed with Atlus's choice of very small but deeply significant human details, especially when animating its characters, which make a huge difference in emotional moments. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this. Persona 3 was probably one of the best games that I played last year in 2020. Certainly there were a few really outstanding moments in it. It's definitely a game I suggest to people who are interested in Persona and want to see what it was like before it became too big. These are just a few, I'm going back to the script. These are just a few thoughts on my experience with Persona 3. I hope they can be useful or illustrative of some of the virtues of the game, or they can explain how some of the decisions that went into making Persona 3 make it the game it is. Thank you for watching.